Hello friends and greetings for the day. Welcome back to another tutorial on ISTQB Foundation level sample paper discussions where we are talking about the tips, tricks and time management related to this examination. So as a part of this particular tutorial, we shall be continuing with our next chapter, that is chapter 3 of set C, and we shall be looking forward to discuss the questions related to static testing as a part of this particular tutorial. So without wasting much of our time, let's get into the content. The next question we have for you is question number 15, and question number 15 says, given the following example defects, which of the following best identifies example defects that could be found by static testing rather than dynamic testing? First of all, correlating things. Of course, in the chapter 3 static testing, we gave you the examples of the static testing defects which can be easily found by static testing compared to that of dynamic testing. In an easy nutshell, dynamic testing defects are found when you execute the product, when you run the product, whereas static testing defects can be found without running the product. So non-executable defects like finding anomalies in requirements, coding related issues by conducting code review, traceability issues, requirement issues, design issues, etc., which are all can be easily done with help of review. So let's quickly look at the example defects which we have. So number one, two different parts of the design specification disagree due to complexity of the design. Now, two different parts of the design specification disagree, which talks about the contradiction in the design specification. And review is a very common method which can easily identify this rather than waiting for the product to be implemented and getting executed, right? So one is a good example of static defect. Let's go to two. The two says a response time is too long and so makes users lose patience. Response time is something which can only be measured when you run the product. It's not statically measurable because response time is a measure of the time taken to respond to a particular query. And until as you execute it, you can not measure that. So B is dynamic defect, like 2 is dynamic defect. Let's go to 3. 3 says a path in the code cannot be reached during execution. For your kind information, static analysis is another method of static testing where we use tools to perform the review on the code. And yes, the capability of code review with help of static analysis is that it can even find unreachable codes, dead codes, duplicate code, infinite loop, etc. And yes, it can easily be identified by static testing than compared to dynamic testing. So 3 is a good candidate. Let's go to 4. Number 4 says a variable is declared but never subsequently used in the program, which is exactly the same that is by static analysis. You can easily identify it compared to that of dynamic testing. Okay, and if I come to the fifth says the amount of memory needed by the program to generate a report is too high. Again, the memory utilization can only be observed by dynamic executions rather than static reviews. So I think that makes it clear and to the point. The right answer for this particular question is D, that is 1, 3, and 4 are static testing defects, whereas 2 and 5 are not, where 2 is talking about response time and 5th is talking about the memory needed. And again, I think the understanding makes it clear, going through the syllabus makes it clear, and having been through the examples of static defects would also make it clear. Let's move on to the next question. The next question we have is question number 16. A little straightforward. Which of the following is a benefit of early and frequent stakeholder feedback? We discussed this in 3.2, and the very first topic we had to talk about is when we consistently present our work to the business, it helps us to understand that are we adhering to the requirements or have we understood what the business wants and we are implementing the same thing. So benefit of early and frequent feedback is basically to understand the business needs, the way they wanted to convey you, and also getting acknowledgement from them for what you have implemented so far. So let's look at the options here. Option A says changes to the requirements are understood and implemented earlier. Looks perfectly fine because this is one of its part, because every single time you present the work, you may have change request involved and you may get it prioritized by the business, because in Agile, benefits of this early and frequent feedback are considered in Agile mostly. And as a part of Agile, we say that the business prioritizes the requirement, and based on their prioritization, we deliver them earlier. So yes, exactly. That's where this fits the purpose. That is, changes to the requirements are understood and implemented earlier can be a frequent feedback benefit of early and frequent feedback. B says it ensures business stakeholders understand user requirements. Business stakeholders, that means the customer, understanding the end user requirement. No, this process is not for that, right? Yes, of course, the business stakeholder would first understand what their end user wants from them, right? For example, if I'm a bank and making an application for my common people out there, I would first understand what my common people want so that I can define the requirements. But that is not what early and frequent feedback is for, right? So that's how you should correlate. It's right, but not for that particular keyword, what is being asked. That's good to see. C says it allows product owners to change the requirement as often as they want. Again, remember one thing, the PO is not something who is defining this change every single time. And early and frequent feedback is not for encouraging the changes in the requirement. It's just that maybe they got some ideas, right? But early and frequent feedback is mainly to get their acknowledgements and understand the requirement, not to encourage them to have the change request being initiated every single time. Okay, so that's not the objective of early and frequent feedback. However, if you further deep dive, a PO can be internal representative as well, and they do not redefine the requirement. If it is sponsor in keywords of Scrum, that is the business, they can modify the requirement. It's not the PO who's responsible to change the requirement. So both the ways it is conflicting and not a relevant option. Let's go to D. Option D says end users are told which requirements will not be implemented prior to release. That's again not something which we are doing as a part of early and frequent feedback, because the ones which are not being implemented, we discuss this early, like as a part of release or maybe early in the sprints, but not the end user. Another important keyword here is end user. If you see here carefully, end users are told. Now there's a big difference between end users and the business stakeholder, right? You don't go and talk to the people in the market that, hey, we are not going to implement this, and that does not happen by this early and frequent feedback. So please keep it in mind that what exactly is the question. However, a particular activity may look absolutely correct for a particular situation, but is this relevant to the question being asked? Many people go wrong with that particular part of it, that they think, yeah, this is true, this happens in my agile process. But is this a part of benefit and early frequent feedback? Answer is no. Then why are we picking up that, right? So let's conclude. The right answer for this particular question is A, that is, changes to requirements are understood and implemented earlier because we will understand what the business wants to see first through these early and frequent feedbacks. Let's move on to the next question. The next question we have is question number 17. And it's more of like, again, the match the following, but this time a little tricky because they are giving you the objectives of each type of review. So on the left side, we have 4 types of review as usual. That is technical review, informal review, inspection, and walkthrough. On the right hand side, we have some objectives. I think for this, I would say you have to stick to the syllabus, because in syllabus, they have given the right keywords for each objective. None of the other understanding would help you to come to the conclusion that what could be the right answer. However, I'll try my level best to assist you beyond the syllabus, that how you can pick the right answer. But trust me, 99.9%, the more you have been through the syllabus, you would get to the right answer. Okay, which is there on my slide deck when we discuss in the tutorial. So let's go back here and see. The very first one we have is technical review. And technical review mainly talks about generating new ideas, which is something unique about it, because in technical, we do talk about workarounds, we do talk about solving technical problems, and see how exactly it can be alternatively implemented. So generating new ideas is a unique keyword which you would find in technical review. Okay, let's go to informal review. Informal review goes to D because the main objective is detecting potential defects, and it generates no formal documented output. But for your kind information, walkthrough, technical review, and inspection, the other three types have a review report, except informal review. So there's a key hint given to you that, of course, the objective is to find defects, but no formal documentation. And as that keyword is used, you can easily say that it is informal review as an objective. Let's go to option 3, that is inspection. Inspection should go to C. The main objective is detecting potential defects, and it requires matrix collection to support process improvement. See, at the end of the day, if you've been through my tutorials already, if not, you will find an I button here on the top, okay? And that should basically be, again, helping you that how important it is to remember the unique keywords from each 4 types of review. The more you remember the uniqueness, the better it is to answer a question from here. Okay, so yes, matrix collection happens only in inspection, but no other type of review. Okay, technical doesn't have it, walkthrough doesn't have it, informal doesn't have it. But inspection has matrix collection, and as well as entry criteria, exit criteria, use of checklist. Are these all unique words for inspection? And then we are left with the one last, that is fourth, walkthrough. Walkthrough should go to B as it is remaining, because educating reviewers, KT, I told you in the examples, knowledge transfer is all an example of walkthrough. So that is where this would fit rightly there. So I think with that being discussed, we can be a little straightforward to conclude that the right answer for this particular question is B, that is 1 goes to A, 2 goes to D, 3 goes to C, and 4 goes to B as the perfect match for each type of review with their respective objectives. So somewhere the unique points will help you, plus these objectives, what they have defined there, remembering the unique points in those objectives will again help you. Let's move on to the next and the last question of this chapter as well. Question number 18. It says, which of the following is a factor that contributes to a successful review? I think we had a bunch of factors discussed there, and at the same time, we summarized it in our tutorial stating that what is so important for any team to follow during a review process to make sure that it turns out to be successful rather than a failure. So let's check out the options here, because options will only help us understand which one is a factor and which one is not. So option A says, ensure management participates as reviewer. That's a little contradicting statement, because management has a direct role in the review as a manager, because there's a standard role of manager when it comes to review process, but not as a reviewer. Okay, so we have manager, moderator, reviewer, author, review leader, scribe. You cannot make manager a scribe. You cannot make a manager as reviewer. Manager have its own responsibility, so they will be taking care of that. So that's wrong. That's where the review will fail, because someone should be there to manage, right? B, split large work products into smaller parts, for sure, because we don't take a bigger chunk of work at the same time, which does not result into any kind of fruitful outputs. So it's very important to simplify your work and then deal with one piece of work at a time. So don't take a larger chunk of work at a time is a good practice. C says set reviewer evaluation as an objective. I think we had the very first point, as I remember very clearly, it said that the objective is to conduct the review on the document, but not for the reviewers. Never evaluate your reviewers, because if you start evaluating or reviewing your reviewers, they may feel a little embarrassed, or this is kind of like a target being given to them, or they might be feeling that I think I'm being judged when I'm participating in reviews. So next time I should not be nominating myself to participate in such activities. So again, nobody is interested to get evaluated when they are asked to contribute or bring some new ideas, right? So even if I am sitting in a big kind of conference and somebody says anybody has any kind of inputs, and if I share my input and people don't appreciate me, I would feel bad to produce the same thing next time, right? However, maybe the idea was not useful that time, but I at least tried my level best to contribute. So next time this person will not contribute. So again, reviewers should never be evaluated as a part of review, right? Let's go to the next one. And the D says plan to cover one document per review. Now, as far as the size of the document is disclosed to you, you can talk about it. You can tell me that B and D is a little conflicting. We cannot conclude on D until unless the size of the document is disclosed to us. If they say the document size is 10 pages, I can talk about it. If they say 200 pages, we never know. So we cannot just blindly make a statement, plan to cover a document which can be of any number of pages as one of our valid responses. Okay, as far as they are clear in the examination. So D cannot be opted just for that reason, because I don't know what's the size of the document, right? And for that being discussed, we can conclude the right answer for this particular question is B, that is split large work products into smaller parts is one of the key reason or factors which could result into success of the reviews. I think that's all what we had from the chapter 3 from the set C, and the 4 questions are being covered. We shall be stepping into the chapter 4 right from the next tutorial. Stay tuned for that. So, should you have anything else, feel free to comment below. I'm always there to address your queries and answer them well. Till then, keep learning, keep exploring, keep understand the context. Thanks for watching the video, team, and happy learning.